Maurice Nicol's Psychological Commentaries, Volume 2, based on his work with Gurdjieff, Birdlip, December 12, 1944, Law of Fate and Law of Accident. Recently, a question was asked in London about attracting one's life. A concrete example was taken in reference to the assassination of one of our foreign ministers in Cairo. The question took the form, as far as I could understand it, why was the chauffeur shot? Was it a result of his being? How does the work explain such an incident? I find this question very interesting to discuss once more, and the following commentaries refer to this problem. In the first place, the work teaches that one's being attracts one's life. Therefore, from this point of view, it was the being of the chauffeur that attracted his death at that moment. We have therefore to speak about what being means, first of all, and in order to do so, we must pass it at once to another teaching of the work, namely that a man can be under the law of accident or the law of his fate. The question then takes this form. Was the death of the chauffeur due to his fate, or was it due to accident? Now, if the chauffeur had been under the law of his fate, then his death was due to his fate. But if the chauffeur was under the law of accident, his death was accidental. Now, people will say that if our state of being attracts our life, it follows that everything that happens to us is fate and therefore inevitable, and as it were, predestined. But we must understand what being means as we are. Our being is a mixture. It's composed of personality and essence. That is, our level of being as we are in life is not one thing, but different things, and different parts of our being are under different laws. And the part of our being that is essential is under the law of fate. That part of our being that is our personality, particularly false personality, is under the law of accident. And this mixture of essence and personality and false personality constitutes our general level of being at the moment. False personality is under 96 orders of law. Personality is under 48 orders of law. Essence is under 24 orders of laws. Our level of being is therefore a very complicated thing. When personality is gradually made more passive, and that means it does not take so much charge of us, our essence begins to grow. This means that we begin to grow into our fate. You must not think that fate means something fatal in the sense of deadly. It means something quite the contrary. It means that when we feel more essential, we know far more about what is our real life, what we should do and think. In other words, we begin to know who we are apart from what we have been taught or to be, or have imagined ourselves to be. The hypnotism of life, as you all know, is a very powerful force. And the great changing event of life always exerts this tremendous hypnotic force on us. We may vow never to do this or that, or let us say never to make war again. But when that event comes along, when the drums begin to beat, we forget our resolutions and become identified with the event. I remember on one occasion, Mr. Ouspensky said that hundreds of thousands of people remembering the last war are perfectly certain that they will never allow themselves to engage in another war. He said this was quite right, but that when the event of another war began to act on them, they would forget, and they would see everything from another point of view. Asked why this happened, he said it was due to two things. One, that man cannot remember, and the other, that man is mechanical, a machine acted on by outer life. I remember arguing with him at one occasion and saying that so many people remember the horrors of the last war that if another did occur practically, nobody would fight. He said very seriously, Nicoll, you don't understand. You don't understand what mechanicalness means. You do not see deeply enough what the work teaches. You think that man has real will and real memory. You're arguing from the point of view that man is already conscious. The tragedy is that man takes himself as conscious and does not see what he is mechanical. What does mechanical mean? It means that something is driven by something else. Man is driven by outer circumstances, by life. Life is like a great belt that turns the machinery of man. People never understand this, and people always think they can do. And when they do something contradictory to the opinions they previously expressed, they do not see any contradiction owing to the action of buffers. Buffers are the most terrible things in us. Their action is to ease the shock of our contradictions. I assure you that when the next war breaks out, everyone will forget all they thought and felt previously. And I said to him, supposing another war does break out? He remained silent, looked at me, and then said, what do you think? Now, when we are under the general law of our being, we are under very mixed laws because our being is not united into unity. We have, as it were, some eyes under the influence of 96 orders of laws, those especially belonging to our purely invented side, our ridiculous pictures of ourselves or self-worship. Then we have other eyes under 48 orders of laws which belong to our personality. And finally, we have a few eyes very close to essence, which is under 24 orders of law. Essence is our more real side. Behind essence lies real I, which is under 12 orders of laws and is in the cosmic scale at the same level of the sun. Let us study again the side octave from the sun that creates organic life on earth. We are part of organic life, this big machine that is created for cosmic reasons to transmit the influences coming down from the upper part of the ray of creation so that they can pass through the narrow place called the interval between fa and mi, the place of missing semitone, so that they can reach the termination of our particular ray, namely our earth and our moon. No one can properly understand what happens on this earth and all its tragedies unless he has a clear idea that we are part of living machinery, not constructed for purposes personally beneficial. This machine, called organic life, was created by the sun, that is, by influences that are conscious, not only to supply the missing part of the ray, but also to make it possible for man on earth to develop upwards in the scale of being through esoteric teaching. Man can ascend in this side octave from the sun. The divine intelligence of this level of the sun has done two things which seem at first sight completely contradictory. It has created organic life at the point where it had to It has created organic life at the point where it had to, and at the same time, it has made possible for man as part of organic life to ascend in the side ladder. This ascending depends on the inner development of a particular man whose level of being is characterized by the possession of magnetic center. A man can therefore remain asleep in the great machinery of the ray of creation and be simply used by it, or he can begin to awaken and realize that there is another possibility that he can follow. And the more that he follows this possibility, the more he will help humanity in general. For this reason, the work teaches that man is a self-developing organism and that you will now see clearly why he can either serve life as an end in itself or take life as a means to another end. Now, in this self-development and in the method of the work that it teaches in regard to it, you will first of all realize that the false personality must be observed and separated from. Through the eyes that form this powerful thing called false personality or imaginary I, we are especially under the law of accident. In the work terminology, we are under the influence of the moon, which is under 96 orders of laws. If man begins to wean himself from the continual reactions of false personality in him, he begins to move away from his external reacting side. A great many mechanical reactions that he formerly indulged in, taking them as himself, will no longer have the same power over him. This is only possible through long and sincere self-observation, through the applied knowledge of the work. But this internal movement will also be accompanied by the beginning of a liberation from what does not belong to him, namely, a liberation from the law of accident. When he begins to work on his personality, the thinking that he knows, he then begins to move still further away from the law of accident and therefore in the direction of the law of his fate. Why is this so? Because he is moving towards the more real part of himself. He is throwing away or separating himself from the outer skins that do not belong to him. He is, as it were, casting off his various dresses. Once Mr. Ouspensky said that man as he is psychologically can be compared to a person wearing an immense number of overcoats, and that the action of the work is like discarding coat after coat. The more dressed up one is and the more one is under the law of accident, that means that anything can happen to you, quite apart from your fate. It means that you are not in touch with your fate. You are only in touch with the invented and imaginary sides of yourself. Here we come to the question of people who have what is called strong personality. From the work point of view, such a strong personality is a great weakness. Such people insist on their rights. They are certain they know what is what. They are sure they know what is right and wrong, and they can produce a very strong impression as long as things go the way they expect. But when things go differently, they collapse because they have nothing real behind them. They have no flexibility, no real intelligence, no power of adapting to different conditions. Often an apparently weak man is much stronger than these people of strong personality who can feel they get a move on. They do not see their inner weakness, nor how much superstructure they're carrying, which is not themselves at all. Now let us return to the question of the chauffeur. Here we probably have a man simply under the law of accident. He has to join up. He carries out his orders. He is shot. He is just an ordinary mechanical man, and he may have thought more deeply about the meanings of things once or twice or more. Probably he just shrugged his shoulders and has done what he is told. Now, supposing this man had a great deal, and supposing he had realized his situation, supposing that he could remember himself, supposing indeed that he was doing his job consciously and not mechanically, this would mean at once that his center of gravity of consciousness was no longer on the external side, but more internal, that is nearer to his essence. His being would then be more under the law of fate. If it was his fate to be shot at that moment, he would probably know it beforehand. If it was his fate not to be shot at that moment, then he would not be shot. He might perhaps become seriously ill a day or two before the situation arose, and he might break his leg or might get up too late. This is along the lines that you all have to think about. This is a difficult problem of accident and fate. Many people, said Mr. Ouspensky, on one occasion are dead already by their fate, but are alive by accident. We can meet them in the street, in the club, in the restaurant. The many people are dead by accident who, if they'd been under the law of their fate, would still be alive. You know how many people are dead? They usually occupy high official positions. They have what is called strong personality. That is, they possess an enormous quality of very powerful buffers. They receive honors and distinctions, but yet they are dead, and they may indeed have died long ago. The law of accident keeps them alive. They are, so to speak, accidentally alive, and they always cling to life, though they're already dead. On another occasion, Mr. Ouspensky said, some illnesses are accidental and some fatal, that is, under fate. I often thought this a strange term under the law of accident. I wonder how an accident could be a law. How can a law be an accident? I gradually realized what it meant by realizing what it might mean to be under the law of fate. I understand that when we are under the law of fate, things go more as they should with us. I understand that a coal heaver would not be made to be an artist and vice versa. And I began to see that the law of accident is really made up of laws that should never really act on us. Laws that were not that we were not created to be under, and which for us take the form of accident. As it were, we get caught into orders of laws that should not affect us. It is as if a fire is burning. If it is under its own laws, but if we insist on casting ourselves into this fire, we put ourselves under the law of accident, because we should not cast ourselves into fires. This is very well worthwhile thinking about deeply. Now, to come back to the original question, was it accident or fate? We might say it was probably accident, but we do not know this man. It is really impossible to say. We must understand that things happen on earth both by fate and by accident. Things happen rightly and wrongly. We cannot judge by what happens. We are not living on a conscious planet, but on a planet very far down in the scale of the ray of creation. God's will is not done on this earth as the opening of the Lord's Prayer teaches us, nor is it done in the earth of ourselves. We are not progressing. Things are not necessarily getting better. People are not becoming more conscious. And here we have to think what the work teaches and learn how to take up new attitudes to our meaning on this earth. Consider, for example, the law of accident manifested in bombing, and consider many of the things, and then try to think what the work teaches. You cannot have ordinary life attitudes and do this work. You must think in a new way. You must repent. That means literal change the whole way of thinking about existence on this planet. After this was read, questions were asked and comments made. I will take the first comment. What you say about the chauffeur perhaps having been shot by fate seems to be of a very gloomy view of fate. The idea is that fate is something fatal, and the word fatal naturally suggests something unpleasant, something terrible. I think the first thing we have to free our minds of is that the law of fate is fatal in this sense. It may be a man's fate to be a great success, to rescue his country from revolution or uphold it at a time of disaster. We must not think that fate is disastrous. Yet the word, by our usual association, always suggests something evil, and we must endeavor to see our fate in quite a different light. For example, a man may be preserved through many dangerous accidents by his fate. By his fate, he is not allowed to die before his time. In this sense, fate means nothing, fatal or deadly, but on the contrary, a preservative force. In this example of the chauffeur, when it was said that he may have died by fate at that moment, you must understand that I have not the slightest idea whether this is true or not. How could one possibly know unless one had studied this man over a long period and known all that is possible to know about him? We scarcely know anything about one another or about ourselves, and so we cannot possibly decide as to whether the fate is accident or is acting on a person at a particular moment. Certainly we can realize with regard to ourselves that we are very identified or in bad negative states or are more exposed to the law of accident. Now, by accident is not merely meant physical accidents such as being shot or being smashed in a car accident. The center of gravity of the meaning of accident is that something happens to you that does not properly belong to you. You may, for example, become tied up with the affairs of someone who has no real connection with you, and as a result get involved in a way that has no real relationship to yourself. Supposing somebody advises me to take a ticket for a lottery and I do so, and I find myself a possessor of 100,000 pounds, do you think this would belong to accident or fate in my life? I am convinced myself that it would belong to accident, and that would do me no good, and in fact interfere with my right life. In fact, accident would become fatal in the ordinary sense. On one occasion, Mr. Ouspensky said, when people begin to feel this work, they begin at the same time to move in the direction of their essence, which is under the law of their right destiny, their fate. You cannot expect to win lotteries, to bet more successfully, and so on. You cannot expect to be more lucky in the ordinary sense. He was talking to someone at the time who had brought off a lucky bet and had asked whether this was due to the work. He said it was simply due to accident. He said to me afterwards in private, Nicoll, suppose you were very lucky. Do you think that this work would make you still more lucky? On the contrary, you must be prepared to find you probably lose this accidental luck. Now, the moment of birth is fatal, but the moment of death is not fatal. Essence causes our birth, and essence is under the law of fate. When we're born with pure essence. We've acquired personality. It may be our fate to die early, but once personality begins to surround essence, and once false personality begins to invent itself, we are acted on by the law of accident. We are born into a world of sleeping people, and very early we learn to fall asleep ourselves. If we could keep awake, we would remain in touch with essence, and so our fate. Essentially, that is, by fate, a man may be an artist, a musician, and so on. If the essence has been developed in a previous recurrence, the man may feel his fate more strongly than he feels the life influences that are forming his personality. But ordinarily, we become surrounded by personality through imitation and suggestion so that we lose touch with ourselves and so pass away from the law of fate. Then anything can happen to us because we are then more or less under the law of accident. We begin to do and say things, we begin to imitate other people, and all this may have little or nothing to do with us and may put us in situations that do not properly belong to us. We become surrounded by an enormous number of great coats. These we have gradually to strip off. We have to learn what it means to say, I am not really like this. This is not I. This is the work of inner separation. This leads to direction of essence, and so towards the development of our essential life, under which is the law of our fate. That is our real destiny, our real meaning. And from this, the real individuality begins to be formed. This path is only possible through self-observation and inner separation. Every one of you must have noticed you have in you eyes that you wish to separate from because they lead you into all sorts of accidental and indeed meaningless situations which more deeply placed eyes in you know are quite useless and which always lead you in the wrong direction. You begin to know that these eyes mislead you. When you realize that you begin to understand what accident means from your growing dislike of these eyes. You know a deeper consciousness by which you recognize these wrong eyes, and then you prefer to remain continuously in contact with the eyes belonging to the eyes that form this deeper consciousness. When you say to yourself genuinely, this I that is speaking through me at the moment is not really I, then you know you are aware of something deeper and begin to understand what the real or more essential part of you belongs to, and it belongs to your fate, to what you really are. Then you begin to understand practically something about what accident and fate mean in yourself.